welcome to Slash Forward. In this episode, we're going to begin down the path of Lovecraftian madness with John Carpenter's 1994 film, In the Mouth of Madness. Let's get to it. We open on a mental institution where several guards are working on bringing in a fresh one. He's hesitant to comply, but only because he's totally not crazy. See? You see? This sets off a course of lunatic ramblings, prompting Saperstein to crank the master volume. Hearing the first several notes of Senorita, our new inmate begins to fall apart. He has a rough evening then, as he continues to see and hear things and have spectral visitations, like a sane person. The next day, Dr.Wrenn arrives, having been on the lookout for admittance or arrest records related to our new patient, John Trent. He enters the room to find a home, and within the warm embrace of his new personal space, Trent no longer wishes to depart. Wrenn gives him a smoke and asks for some detail to enter into his report. So we flash back to see Mr. Trent employing the tools of his trade as a top-tier insurance investigator. He strings this scumbag out, making him sweat and securing a confession of his fraud. As if showing wasn't enough, his partner Robinson then kisses his ass over coffee, allowing him to also tell us how good he is. As they discuss the finer details of interrogation, this typical day turns atypical as an axe-wielding madman goes crazy on this window like it's a tree, silly goose, and asks him,
"Do you read Sutter Cane?"
starting off this whole mess. Despite this, Trent shows up for his next assignment, investigating the claim of Arcane Publishing, who claimed losses as a result of the disappearance of Sutter Cane. The axe-wielding madman was actually Kane's literary agent and business intermediary. Since he's no longer available for questioning, they have very little to go on. With rumors that Kane's writing causes disturbances in some individuals, Trent starts by acquiring some books for research, carefully sidestepping fanboys along the way. He reads, mostly unimpressed, but is struck with a sudden urge to decoupage. That is disturbing. He discovers the book covers trace out a map, the type of thing he could have looked up on a fan wiki if the movie had been made only 10 years later. They determine it to be a map to Hobbs End, New Hampshire, a fictitious town in a fictitious state. Trent believes this to be a contrivance of the publisher in order to generate interest in the upcoming book. He's still committed to go to either prove fraud or bring back their cash cow, and they choose to send Linda Stiles with him, Sutter Cane's account manager, to chaperone. The two set out on an epic road trip, complete with funny and abusive pranks, but have a hard time locating their destination, so they keep driving forever. Stiles gets tired, but manages to avoid hitting 2 of 3 bicyclists despite this. So that's not bad. And the third one's okay. She eventually loses the road, finding herself floating through an expansive void, which terminates in a covered bridge. They've arrived in Hobbs End, a quaint little town mostly devoid of residents. They check in at the local hotel where Stiles seems intimately familiar with the layout.
There's a loose board there.
She reveals that the hotel is from Kane's book. Trent is skeptical and points out the lack of a Gothic church viewable from the hotel. But then Stiles corrects him on his cardinal directions and he evacuates into his pants. They explore the facade, but a posse of gun-toting locals roll up for what appears to be mob justice. They demand the return of Johnny Boy, but the church plays a little joke on them and they're left with Sutter Cane himself, who releases the hounds. The appearance of Kane has Trent back to thinking this is a stunt of some sort. Stiles admits that they did initially send Kane away as a stunt, but then he vanished for realsies. And then she points out that the scenes they're witnessing in real life are part of his new book, which deals with the end of the world, so that doesn't bode well. Trent goes to clear his head and tries to get Mrs. Pickman to reveal that she's an actor. This allows Stiles time to slip out behind him and call dibs on the car. She goes to the church to search for answers and finds Sutter Cane, studiously clacking away on his typewriter. He confides that he recently discovered his books have the power to create new realities, because he's actually been ghostwriting for the Elder Gods. When Trent heads downtown, he finds Stiles and the townsfolk playing Ring Around the Rosie. He attempts to rescue her and get the hell out of Hobbs End, but Stiles plays her own prank on him, and he doesn't take kindly to pranks at his expense. As they drive, Stiles finds herself under the influence of Kane's writing, and apparently, Kane wants her to act like an attention whore. Trent goes on without her, but soon learns the futility of trying to escape Hobbs End, eventually opting to take the Groundhog Day approach and just have fun with it. But a last-second change of direction sends him straight into a confessional. Kane shows up to brag on his book numbers.
They've sold over 1 billion copies.
While Trent is still trying to figure out how the publisher managed to stage this. Kane explains that the more people who believe in his books, the quicker he can bring about the end. He then finishes his manuscript and gives it to Trent to return it to broader society, explaining that Trent's actions are all subject to his writing. He then offers to have him return home through the event horizon, but Trent refuses, wanting to assert himself as a big man in control of his own destiny. In response, Kane transforms his face into an anus, through which Trent is treated to a cold, endless void filled with screaming, unspeakable horrors. And that gets his motor running, eventually falling back into reality. He hitches his way back into town, finding it difficult to rid himself of the manuscript manuscript, and eventually makes it back to the publisher. He explains the whole story, but Harglow has no memory of sending him to Hobbs End with anyone named Styles, which is a relief from a liability perspective since he came back without her, but not in terms of his sanity. We also find out the book he's been trying to escape from has already been published and is already a bestseller. Outside, the city is plagued with violence and with people going stark raving mad trying to get a copy of the new book. Trent tries to prevent the apocalypse one person at a time. This brings us back to the beginning, wherein Dr. Wrenn wraps up his report and bids him adieu. That evening, there's a disturbance outside his cell, but we don't know if it's kept at bay due to the crosses or because it's actually an existential nightmare happening inside his own mind. It's eventually confirmed real as Trent wanders the city, now mostly devoid of souls, eventually taking in a free movie because why not? And it's nothing but his greatest hits, which are apparently hilarious. And that was In the Mouth of Madness, the first stop on our journey. If you find your sanity still intact, give it some time. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.